We are now in the third week of August, and now is about time when most new PhD students are starting their doctoral journey. And if you are starting your PhD program just now, believe me, back in 2009, I was in your shoes. And I have a lot of lessons to share, things that I learned over time. Had someone told me these things, I would have been more efficient with my PhD program. And therefore, I believe that sharing these tips will be immensely beneficial for students, especially students in business. Although some of these tips are more catered towards PhD business students and even within business information systems and strategy students, but there are other lessons that can be applied more broadly. This is Chaitanya Sambhara, faculty at the College of Business, University of Texas, Arlington. My first step is to build a proper reference management tool for yourself. In my case, I use EndNotes, but there are other good software such as Mendeley and Zotero. Regardless of the software, I have some important tips to share on how you should arrange your EndNote file. So here you see my EndNote file, all right? And as you can see, I had named it August 1st. 2023 at 12:10 p.m. which means when was the last time I had updated this file. Now if you look at this file, I have around 1790, almost 1800 papers. Okay, and now these 1800 papers were obviously not added in one day, right? I have been building this EndNote file for 13-14 years now. Now see what I have done. What I have done here is that for every single reference, I have attached the PDF document. Whatever paper I'm looking at, the moment I click on it, I see that the PDF document is attached. Okay, and I try to include as many PDF documents as possible. Next thing what I do is that based on the topic of the paper and based on my own requirements and needs, I categorized all those papers into all these categories. For example, for a particular type of dependent variable, I have 3 papers stored. And if I am doing some research on, say, decision making, I have some papers here. For business value of IT, I have 106 papers, and I can even sort through which is the oldest paper that I have all the way to the newest paper here. Now you get the idea, I hope, right? What I have done is that I have really maintained my EndNote file. That way, I do not have to go to a folder and search for papers. And because EndNote is such a powerful tool, if I can write the author's name, I can easily get all their papers. For example, if I search for Brynjolfsson, I can see all their papers right here. It's very easy to search. Now, as you can see, having such an organized EndNote file is immensely helpful. For example, if I'm traveling and if I do not have access to the internet, if I need to open a paper, I can still open the paper. If I have it in my EndNote file, I have that access to that paper, right? So anyways, these are all so many categories. And if you see, I have also have categories for theories. For example, agency theory, I have all these papers on agency theory. Any theory that you want, let's say resource-based view, I have all these papers on resource-based view, and so on. And now that takes us to our second tip. If you're a PhD student, especially in information systems and strategy, what you need to know is that theoretical contribution is of utmost importance for papers that need to be published in top journals. And you will find yourself in your PhD program, especially in the first 2 years, learning about a variety of theoretical perspectives that you will need to contribute to, that you will need to add to in order to make your paper credible. So one tip that I have for you is that maintain that proper EndNote file with each theory categorized. And then what you need to do next is that even have a folder of theories. Okay, and for each theory, you should have a dedicated folder. And in that folder, you need to include your notes along with the papers. Let me show you. See, for example, I have this research folder in which I have theories folder. Okay, and when I go to theories, these are some of the theories in which I focus on. Okay, there are many more theories in information systems and strategy, but these are theories of my interest. Now, when you open any of these folders, for example, let's say I open agency theory. Okay, in agency theory, I have notes for myself. Okay, and I have written in detail what this theory is about. Okay, what are the key points that I need to remember about this theory, and I have written detailed notes for myself. Okay, and if I need to learn about agency theory again later, if I've forgotten about it, okay, I have all my notes right here. Okay, and here I have summarized some of these papers. Okay, in this paper, these are the things that they talk about. In other papers, what are the things that they talk about, and so on. Okay, let me just show you one more example. Let me pick something else. Let me pick transaction cost economics. When I click on it, you see that I have some papers, but then I have a folder called Transaction Cost Economics Fundamentals. So what are the fundamental aspects of transaction cost? Okay, and these are my own notes. I have explained this to myself. Okay, and what are the assumptions? Okay, and how is it applied at 3 different levels and so on. Okay, and these notes really help me later when I'm trying to contribute to these theories in my own research papers. My third tip is related to methods, empirical methods that you will be learning in your PhD program. Now, what will happen is that you will be taking a variety of courses. You will be learning a variety of methods in those courses. Okay, and now how much can you keep a track of? What you will end up using is only a portion of all those methods that you have learned. And what happens over time is that because you are not using other methods, you will tend to forget them. Okay, now what do you do when you need to learn them again for a research project later? Do you have to go through all the book all over again? It might be more difficult, right? Therefore, my tip is that while you are learning a method, try and do a good job of teaching that method to yourself for your future self. Let me show you with an example. Okay, now let me go back to my Dropbox folder. Here I have a methods folder here, methods and statistics. Now here I can open anything, difference and difference or fixed effects or 2SLS. Let me just open 2SLS. Okay, this is instrument variable and two-stage least square estimation. Here I have written detailed notes on what it is, how it is to be used, what kind of commands need to be used, and here I'm teaching my future self on what all that needs to be done when you are using 2SLS method. Okay, and what I should do and what I should not do. Let me just show you another example. Let's say difference in difference or propensity score matching. This is one of the methods that I had learned recently. Okay, PSM propensity score matching tutorial chai. So this is a tutorial I wrote for myself, and propensity score matching is being used more and more in research papers now. So see what I have done. Okay, I have given the basic definition and my notes keep going on and on. Okay, I have explained this to myself in detail, what all this method is and how it is to be used. Okay, so I have some copies from the slides that I have copy pasted here, and then I have offered detailed explanation to myself what needs to be done. Okay, now whenever I need to use this method for myself, I do not need to go through a book. I can actually refer my notes, and once I go through the entire notes, I will have a clear understanding of what this method is and how it is supposed to be used. Okay, so that's about it. Now let us move towards our tip number 4. Now tip number 4 is often underestimated by many people. What I'm talking about in tip number 4 is that you should keep a folder where you keep a track of all your data sets, and which for each data set you should have papers through which you collected that data, and if possible, if the data is more complicated, then you should write notes to yourself on how you computed that data. Okay, let me show you again. Going back to my screen, Dropbox research folder, I have data computation folder, I have data files. These are some of the data sources from which I collected my data. And then when I click on data files, you can see how many data sets I have. Okay, these are all different types of constructs and data sets that I have collected over years. Okay, let me show you some example. Let's say this data set on environmental uncertainty. When I click on it, I have two folders, 2015 and 2023. What I mean by that is that I had computed that data in 2015 the last time, and the data in that folder was up until either 2015 or 2014. Now in 2023, I did all those computations all over again where I updated the data. I think in this data set, I have data until 2022 if I'm not mistaken. So let's see what I have in 2023 data set. Okay, I have environmental uncertainty has 3 dimensions: complexity, dynamism, and munificence. Dynamism and munificence data is computed from the same source, so I have one single folder, and complexity's computation is quite different, so I have a different folder for it. Now see, here are all the papers that have shown how to compute it. But what happens many times is that the message in those papers tends to be quite cryptic. The authors often explain how they collected and processed the data and how they computed it, but oftentimes it is not detailed enough. You have to figure out many things on your own. And when I end up figuring out things on my own, I write detailed notes for myself. So let us open the calculation of environmental uncertainty in 2023. Okay, when I open the document, what I see is that, okay, these dynamism, what is the measure, munificence, what is the measure, complexity, what is the measure, okay, and I have written detailed steps on what data to download, okay, what query to write, okay, and how I should collect and process the whole data. I have detailed notes for myself, okay, and I have written about the code that I'm using. And I've also written about the code that I'm using, because in the Stata file I have some code, and here I'm explaining what that code is and how it is to be used. And even in Excel file, what I have done here. Okay, and if you see, such detailed notes cannot be found in any paper. Okay, now EndNote issues that will come up. Now what happens is that I have written to myself that when you're computing, you will end up, in my case, I will end up facing some issues. So how should I resolve these issues is what I've written to myself. Okay, so these are detailed notes on what all things I had done. Now compare my notes with this portion of this paper. If you see, all that description that this paper has given is that starts from here, following prior literature, and it ends right here somewhere. Okay, now how can one paragraph be compared to multiple pages that I had written for myself in this document? You cannot, right? And let me just show you the final outcome of my data set. I have this access file, I have EU final data 2023. When I click on it, I have all these measures that I have, okay, for each SIC code, which is the industry code for each year. Okay, what are the values? For example, dynamism, which is a measure of sales volatility and income volatility. I have these numbers and so on. Tip number 6 I have for you is that whenever you come up with ideas, try and document them as soon as possible. In fact, you should have a folder in which you have a document which documents all your ideas. Let me show you my folder. And I have this ideas folder in which I have all these ideas listed. Okay, and I have a Word document of list of ideas. Okay, and when I open the Word document, okay, I have rating of 1 through 5. The higher the rating, it means that the paper is more plausible. The lower the rating, the difficult it is. The lower the rating, the difficult the paper is to execute, because I probably do not have data and so on. Okay, now I've cut this out because I have already implemented this idea, for example, and I have all my ideas written right here, and where I have tried to explain to myself what all can be done. Okay, let's say, for example, for each idea, let's say idea number 3, the rating is 2, for idea number 2, rating is 4, and for each idea that is numbered there, in that corresponding folder, I have written in more detail what all I think can be done. Okay, I have some reference papers, and I have written my ideas, basic ideas right here. Okay, so now if I can execute this idea, this can turn out to be a good research paper, is what I think. And based on these ideas, you can start building your research pipeline. The better your pipeline, the better are your chances for success in this career. Now let us move to our tip number 7. My tip number 7 may or may not apply to everyone. Okay, now what I used to do is that when I was talking to my doctoral advisor as a PhD student on any project that I was working on, it is important to take notes while we are discussing things, right? But if you're too busy taking notes, some very important and interesting things that are being discussed, you may miss out on it, because while they were saying those things, you are too busy writing notes. So what you should do instead is that if you have agreement with your professor, you should record that meeting. Now, if your professor doesn't want you to record their voice, then you cannot do that. Okay, then this tip won't apply to you. In my case, my doctoral advisor always wanted me to record all those meetings so that nothing is lost. Okay, so what I used to do is that while he's speaking, I would record things, and if a certain important point is being made, what I would do is that I would write the timestamp on a piece of paper. Okay, at 15 minutes 45 seconds, this is an important point was being made, and this is exactly the point that we are talking about. Likewise, at the end of the meeting, I will have all those notes at what timestamp, what topic was being discussed, and my focus would be on the discussion instead. And then what it also does is that once you are recording that meeting and once you are writing notes about timestamps, you can actually write better notes later. For example, again, I have a folder called meetings and discussions, which is here. Okay, I have audio files here, so I can go back to that audio file and refer to whatever that was being discussed in that meeting. It is taking a second to open. So these are all my audio files with discussions with people. Okay, then I have text transcripts, where in each file I have all that was being discussed. Let's say, for example, in October 2013, what was I discussing? Okay, so here I have timestamps that this meeting happened at 10:30 in the morning on this particular date, the topics that were discussed, okay, and what are the points that were discussed. So that can actually really help you keep a track on your own progress based on the meetings that happened. My tip number 8 is to learn to listen in those discussions. Okay, do not interrupt when a senior person is speaking. And what used to happen many a times is that because I was recording all these meetings, when I would sometimes go back to those meetings and hear those discussions again, what I noticed is that a lot of times I used to interrupt my advisor when he was making a very important point, because I was stuck in another important point that I thought was important in my own head, and only to later realize that what I had in my mind was actually not all that important or interesting. In fact, my advisor, who knows much better than me about research, was actually genuinely making a very good point. And by interrupting him, I actually lost that opportunity to let him elaborate more on that point. So this is what I learned the hard way. After I listened to a few of my recordings, I learned that, you know what, when an interesting point is being made, I should hold myself accountable. I should control myself and go with the flow of the discussion. My tip number 9 is that in your area of work, identify the most influential researchers. Not in just your narrow area, but it is also important to identify and recognize the important scholars in your field. Now, what happens is that once you go to conferences, if you have read their papers, go to those senior scholars and introduce yourself. Tell them that you have read their paper, what you liked about that paper, and if you have any questions, you can even ask them those questions. People really appreciate when someone comes to them and tells them that I have read your paper, or you can even say that, okay, I read that paper, it really helped me formulate my own research in a different way. People like that their work is creating an impact. And it is also important to see when they did their own research in that paper, how did they collect data? What kind of research questions they had asked? You should document all that. I would even go as far as saying that if you know their PhD students, if you find out who their PhD students are, go talk to them, become friends with them. They are your potential future collaborators. In fact, I had done that several times, and other people have also done that with me when they came to me and showed me their work and asked for my comments. And what happens many times is that once you have made a connection with a senior scholar, you can actually show them your research in a future conference. If you are meeting them for the first time, do not show them your research. Okay? But once you have made a good connection, good friendship with them, whenever you meet them at a conference, show the work that you are doing and ask them how you can improve your work. And my last tip is that whenever you do any work, always save your work on cloud. You cannot afford to put all your work on a PC, on a laptop, and have your laptop stolen or damaged. It had happened to me, okay? When I was a doctoral student, somebody stole my laptop. And when that happened, I lost some personal data, for example, some pictures, but all my work was stored on cloud. So I was able to recover all of my work because it was stored on cloud. Had it not been the case, I would have been in big trouble, because all the work that I had done would have disappeared like that. And that, my friends, is the end of this video. I hope you liked this video. I hope this was beneficial to you. Thank you for watching. Jai Hind and God bless America.